She came to my door at midnight to complain about the noise, but that night, it wasn't the walls that kept us awake, it was the silence between us. The story opens in the stillness of a quiet apartment complex, where the narrator, a 24-year-old freelance illustrator, works late into the night. His room is dim except for the soft yellow glow of his desk lamp, sketch pads scattered around like unfinished thoughts. Through his open window, the hum of the city feels distant, a world moving outside his own cocoon of solitude. He has lived in this building for a few months, but barely knows his neighbors. The woman in the unit next door, however, has always caught his attention in small, fleeting ways. The muted click of her heels in the hallway, the warm scent of brewed coffee that drifts from under her door in the early mornings, the low but steady sound of her humming when she waters the plants on her balcony. He has never spoken more than a polite hello to her, yet he feels an odd awareness of her presence, as if some invisible thread connects their lives through the thin wall they share. It's close to midnight when he hears the first knock on his door. At first, he thinks he imagined it. The second knock is firmer, deliberate, yet not angry, more like someone trying not to wake the whole building. When he opens the door, he's met with the unexpected sight of her, his neighbor, standing barefoot in loose gray sweatpants and a light cardigan pulled close around her. Her hair, slightly mussed as if she had been trying to sleep, frames a face that still carries the remnants of her usual composure. There's something arresting about seeing her like this, not the graceful woman he's glimpsed in daylight, but someone softer, almost fragile in the late-night quiet. Her voice, low and measured, carries a touch of apology as she says, "I'm sorry to bother you at this hour, but could you keep the volume down? I think I heard your music through the wall." He feels his ears warm with embarrassment. The music had been barely above a whisper, something he plays when drawing, and yet the thin walls betrayed him. He steps back slightly, scratching the back of his neck as he murmurs an apology. What surprises him is not her complaint, but the way her eyes linger on the sketches spread across his table, not judging, but curious. Their conversation is brief, but laced with a quiet tension he can't quite name. The distance between them is only the width of the doorway, yet it feels narrower because of the silence that follows each exchange. He notices how her cardigan sleeve slips slightly, revealing the curve of her wrist as she crosses her arms. She notices his hesitant smile, the kind that appears when someone is both shy and intrigued. Before leaving, she gives a polite nod, her expression softening just a fraction. "It's fine. I just couldn't sleep," she admits quietly, almost as if the complaint had been an excuse. He catches that small confession, storing it somewhere in the back of his mind. As she walks back down the dim hallway, her footsteps soft against the carpet, he stands at the door a moment longer than necessary. The air between them had felt charged, not with conflict, but with an unexpected, unspoken awareness. That night, even after turning off his music, he struggles to sleep. The knock at midnight has unsettled something in him, something he can't yet explain but knows he won't forget. The next morning arrives reluctantly, with sunlight leaking in pale streaks through the blinds. The narrator wakes to the muffled sounds of a kettle whistling from next door. It's strange how much he notices now, the soft clatter of dishes, the faint melody of a radio playing an old song, the rhythm of her day already unfolding just beyond the wall. He tries to focus on his work, but keeps thinking about the night before, the way she had stood at his door with a mix of composure and vulnerability, the hint of sleeplessness in her eyes. He sketches absent-mindedly, and without realizing it, draws her silhouette as she leaned against his doorframe, cardigan falling loosely from her shoulder. When he notices what he's done, he flips the page quickly, almost embarrassed by his own thoughts. Late afternoon drifts in with soft rain tapping against the window. The building feels quieter than usual, wrapped in the hush that rainy days bring. While making tea, he hears faint laughter through the wall, hers, low and warm, carrying a note of relief that catches him off guard. He finds himself smiling without meaning to, as if her laughter had reached across the wall to touch him. A few hours later, while stepping into the hallway to collect a delivery, he nearly bumps into her at her own door. She's dressed casually again, jeans and a cream-colored sweater with sleeves pushed to her elbows. She's holding a potted plant, its leaves damp as if she's just brought it in from the rain. "Careful," she says, a hint of a smile tugging at her lips. The warmth in her tone makes the hallway feel smaller, like it belongs to just the two of them. He apologizes with a laugh, reaching out instinctively to steady the plant when it wobbles in her hands. For a brief moment, his fingers brush against hers, a light touch, almost unnoticeable, but enough to spark a flicker of awareness between them. She glances at his hand, then at his face, her eyes unreadable but not cold. "Thank you," she says softly, shifting the plant to her other arm. He asks about the plant, a harmless question, but it opens a small window into her world. She explains it's a gift from a colleague, something she's trying not to let die. Her words carry a playful self-deprecation that makes her seem less distant than he'd imagined. The conversation is brief, but the ease in her voice leaves a lingering warmth. That evening, as the rain turns to a soft drizzle, he sits by his desk again, sketchbook open. The music stays low this time, out of consideration. Through the thin wall, he hears the faint murmur of her voice, perhaps on the phone with someone, punctuated by moments of silence, then soft humming. The sounds feel strangely intimate, as though life itself is reminding him she's close by. Before bed, he pauses near the shared wall, resting his palm lightly against it without really knowing why. The rain has stopped, leaving only the faint scent of damp earth drifting in through the window. In that quiet moment, he senses the beginning of something unspoken, a connection forming not through words, but through the spaces between them. That night, he falls asleep to the faint, comforting hum of her radio next door, the boundary between their lives feeling thinner than ever. The rain has passed, but the air still carries its cool, damp scent. Days slip quietly into a routine. Work, muted sounds through the wall, occasional hallway encounters that always seem to leave the narrator thinking more than he wants to admit. It's Saturday afternoon when he first notices her sitting alone in the small communal garden at the back of the building. She's at one of the old iron benches, legs crossed, a book in hand, sunlight finding its way through the shifting leaves above her. From the window of his apartment, he can see the breeze stirring the loose strands of her hair, her cardigan falling off one shoulder as if she's too lost in the page to notice. He hesitates at the window for too long before finally deciding to head downstairs with his sketchbook under his arm, an excuse even to himself. When he reaches the garden, he's careful not to startle her, clearing his throat softly before stepping closer. She looks up, surprised but not unwelcoming. "Didn't know anyone else used this spot," she says, closing the book with a finger slipped between the pages to hold her place. He gestures to the empty space on the bench's far end. "Mind if I sit? I draw better outside sometimes." She gives a small nod, and he takes a seat, leaving a polite distance between them, far enough not to intrude, but close enough that he can sense the warmth of her presence. The garden is hushed except for the soft rustle of leaves and the occasional chirp of sparrows. For a while, they sit in silence, he sketching the uneven lines of the garden fence, she pretending to keep reading but occasionally glancing sideways, as if curious about what he's drawing. The quiet is comfortable, yet carries a weight neither of them names. Eventually, she breaks it. "You're always awake late," she says, her tone light but laced with curiosity. "Do you work at night?" He explains about his freelance projects, how the late hours are often his most creative time. She listens, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and tells him about her job at a local publishing house. Long hours, deadlines, the solitude of coming home to an empty apartment. Something in the way she says that last part, almost offhand, but not without meaning, makes him glance at her. He wonders how often she sits alone in that garden, or how long she's lived next door without anyone to share those small, quiet moments with. A breeze picks up, carrying the smell of damp soil. A page from his sketchbook flutters loose and lands near her feet. She bends to pick it up, brushing off a speck of dirt before handing it back. Their fingers graze briefly, just a whisper of contact, but the touch sends a ripple through the stillness. She clears her throat, shifting slightly on the bench as if to shake off the moment. "Thanks," he murmurs, feeling an unexpected rush of warmth. The silence that follows is different now, not heavy, but aware. Both of them seem to feel it, the fragile thread of connection stretching a little tighter. As the sun begins to dip, the shadows lengthen across the garden. She closes her book and stands, brushing off her sweater. "Enjoy your sketching," she says, her voice softer now, as though acknowledging a shared understanding they can't yet name. He watches her leave, her figure outlined in the fading light. The bench beside him feels suddenly colder. For the first time, he senses the weight of the age difference, not as a barrier, but as a space filled with questions neither of them dares to ask. That night, back in his apartment, he sketches her again, this time not from memory alone, but from the quiet impression she left sitting beside him, sunlight catching the edges of her hair. The weeks after their garden meeting unfold with a subtle shift neither of them openly acknowledges. Their brief exchanges in the hallway have grown less formal. A shared nod when passing each other's doors, a half-smile in the elevator, an occasional good night, spoken with a warmth that lingers a moment too long. The narrator notices small changes. Her door left slightly ajar on warm evenings to let in the air, the soft amber glow of her lamp spilling into the hallway at night. He grows more attuned to her presence, even without seeing her, the scent of freshly brewed tea drifting under the shared wall, the faint echo of classical piano music that she sometimes plays late in the evening. One particularly chilly night, he's sitting at his desk with a steaming mug of coffee, trying to focus on a deadline. Outside, the wind rattles the window panes, carrying a faint drizzle that makes the building feel wrapped in solitude. Around 10 o'clock, there's a gentle knock on his door. He opens it to find her standing there, wrapped in a long charcoal shawl, her hair slightly tousled from the wind that's crept in through the hallway window. Her expression is somewhere between hesitant and amused. "Sorry," she says softly, almost sheepishly. "My heater's acting up again. I remembered you mentioned once you were good with tools. Would you mind taking a quick look?" He agrees almost too quickly, slipping on his jacket and following her next door. Her apartment feels different from his, warmer in tone, even with the faulty heater. A faint scent of chamomile tea lingers in the air, and bookshelves line the far wall, their spines a mix of muted colors and worn edges. A soft throw blanket is draped over the couch, and a single lamp glows beside it, casting a circle of light that makes the space feel cozy rather than lonely. While he kneels beside the heater to inspect it, she stands nearby, arms folded loosely across her chest, watching him with an expression he can't quite read, part curiosity, part gratitude. They speak little. The silence isn't uncomfortable, just expectant. As he tightens a loose screw, their conversation drifts to simple things: the weather, their work, the way the building seems to creak when the wind picks up. Her voice has a calm cadence that makes even the most ordinary remarks feel intimate. When the heater finally hums back to life, a faint warmth begins to spread through the room. She thanks him, her voice softening as she pulls the shawl a little closer around her shoulders. "Stay for tea," she offers after a brief pause. "You look like you could use a break." He hesitates, then nods. They sit on opposite ends of the couch, the space between them wide enough to be proper, but close enough for each to feel the other's presence. The teacups warm their hands, and as they talk, about books, about how both of them prefer quiet nights to crowded gatherings, the distance between them feels less like an unspoken rule and more like a thin line waiting to be crossed. At one point, she laughs softly at a story he tells, the sound catching him off guard. It's a warm, unguarded laugh that seems to fill the small apartment. She reaches up absent-mindedly to tuck her hair behind her ear, her fingers brushing the edge of her cheek as she looks at him. Not quite directly, but enough to make the air feel charged. The evening ends without anything dramatic. He leaves after finishing his tea, offering a quiet goodnight at the door. But as he steps into the hallway, he realizes that the warmth of her living room lingers with him, not just in his skin, but somewhere deeper, as if he's carried a piece of it back into his own apartment. That night, as he lies awake listening to the soft hum of her newly working heater through the wall, he knows that whatever has begun between them is no longer just a neighborly connection. Something unspoken has shifted, not in words, but in the way silence feels when they share it. For a few days after the evening tea, their interactions remain warm but restrained, as if both are silently aware of the delicate line they're treading. They continue to exchange polite greetings in the hallway, yet each smile seems to hold more than the words that follow. The narrator senses that she's begun to retreat again, like a tide pulling quietly back from the shore. It's a rainy Sunday evening when he sees her again in the communal garden. This time, She's without a book, sitting beneath the old wooden pergola while the rain drips steadily through the leaves above. The muted gray of the sky makes the garden feel smaller, almost like a private corner of the world. He steps out hesitantly, umbrella in hand. "You'll get soaked out here," he says, offering to share the umbrella's shelter. She looks up, startled for an instant, then shakes her head with a small smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. "I like the rain," she murmurs. "Sometimes it's the only thing that drowns out the noise in my head." Something in her tone makes him pause. He sits down beside her anyway, the umbrella angled awkwardly to shield them both. The rain's soft patter fills the silence. After a while, she speaks again, her voice quieter now. "You're, what, 24? 25. 24, he answers. She nods slightly, her gaze fixed on the rain pooling around the roots of the garden's lone tree. "You remind me of myself when I first moved here. Always awake too late, thinking you're chasing something important." Her words carry a hint of fondness, but there's an edge to them, something unsaid. He studies her profile, the way the damp air clings to the loose strands of her hair. "You make it sound like I'm doomed to regret it later," he says lightly, hoping to coax a smile from her. This time, she doesn't smile. "No, I just know what it's like to be your age and to think certain things matter more than they do." She hesitates before adding, "You should be careful about how close you get to people who are at a very different place in life. It's not always fair to either of them." The words land between them like a small stone dropped into still water, sending ripples they both feel but don't acknowledge aloud. He doesn't argue. Instead, he shifts slightly under the umbrella so it covers more of her shoulder. The simple gesture draws her attention. For a heartbeat, their eyes meet. There's a softness in her gaze now, as if she wants to take the words back, but can't. "I don't think closeness has to be unfair," he says quietly. She looks away, her lips pressing into a thin line. "You say that now," she replies, almost a whisper. The rain intensifies briefly, drumming against the umbrella, then eases again. Neither of them moves. In the silence, he feels the weight of her words, the unspoken acknowledgement of the age difference, of the gap in experience and the fears that come with it. When the rain slows to a mist, she stands first, brushing droplets from her sweater. "Thank you for the umbrella," she says softly, her tone more distant than before. He watches her leave, her figure blurred by the drizzle. The garden feels colder without her beside him, though the air hasn't changed. That night, back in his apartment, he replays their conversation in his head. He realizes that while they'd grown closer in recent weeks, there's an invisible barrier she's quietly trying to maintain, a wall built not of distrust, but of caution. As he lies awake listening to the rain taper off outside, he wonders if the space she's keeping is meant to protect her, or him. The days following their rainy garden talk carry a subtle heaviness, like a curtain that hasn't quite settled back into place. Their hallway greetings remain polite, but something unspoken lingers in her glance, a guardedness that wasn't there before. The narrator senses she's retreating again, and though he wants to bridge the gap, he isn't sure how without crossing her boundaries. On a cool Thursday evening, the building's power flickers out during an unexpected storm. The hallway lights die first, then the hum of the appliances fades into silence. Through the thin wall, he hears her moving about, the muffled thump of a drawer opening, the soft scrape of furniture as she searches for a candle. A moment later, there's a knock at his door. When he opens it, she's standing there in the dim light of a flashlight, her expression more amused than anxious. "Do you happen to have extra candles?" she asks. "Mine barely lasts an hour." He finds a couple in a kitchen drawer and offers them with a grin. "Power outages make the place feel like a campsite," he jokes. She chuckles softly, the sound more relaxed than he's heard in days. "Or a haunted house," she teases. As the storm intensifies outside, thunder rolling low and distant, she lingers in the hallway, not immediately returning to her apartment. There's an odd comfort in the shared inconvenience. He senses it too, and after a brief hesitation, he asks, "Want to wait out the worst of it in here? My place might be a little warmer and less haunted." She hesitates, then nods. Inside, the candlelight softens the sharp edges of the small apartment. Shadows dance along the walls, flickering across the scattered sketches on his table. The room feels smaller yet cozier, as if the storm has drawn its borders inward. They settle near the window, listening to the rain lash against the glass. For a while, they talk about nothing of consequence. Favorite books, how both dislike crowded parties, how she used to live near the ocean. Her voice, lit by candlelight, carries a gentleness that feels different tonight, less guarded, more open. Eventually, their words trail into a quieter space. She watches the flame flicker, her expression reflective. "You remind me of someone I used to know," she says softly. "Someone who believed people were easier to understand than they really are." He tilts his head, curious. Was that a good thing or a bad thing? "A bit of both," she admits. "He was kind. But sometimes kindness can be complicated." There's a silence that follows, not awkward, but charged. The wind rattles the window pane, and instinctively she wraps her cardigan tighter around herself. Without thinking, he shifts slightly closer, offering, "Here, it's warmer near the candle." Their shoulders nearly touch now, close enough that he can feel the soft brush of the fabric of her sleeve against his arm. She doesn't pull away. When she finally speaks again, her voice is barely above a whisper. "You're too young to carry the kind of patience you do. Most men your age wouldn't notice the things you notice." He smiles faintly at her words. "Maybe I notice because it's you." She looks at him then, really looks, as if weighing the sincerity in his face. Her gaze softens, but there's a hint of sorrow there too, as though she's fighting something she can't quite voice. The candles burn lower, casting longer shadows across the room. She finally exhales a quiet sigh and admits, "I didn't mean to keep you at a distance. I just didn't want to start something that could end up hurting either of us." It's the first time she's openly acknowledged the tension that's been growing between them. He doesn't press for more. Instead, he offers a simple truth. "We don't have to know what this is yet. We can just be here tonight. That's enough." Her shoulders relax a little at his words. For the first time in weeks, the space between them feels unburdened, not by grand declarations, but by a small, honest understanding. When the power finally hums back to life, she smiles faintly at the light overhead, almost reluctant to leave the warmth of the candlelit quiet. She thanks him for the candles and steps toward the door, but before leaving, she pauses and says, "It's good, not feeling alone in this building tonight." He watches her disappear into the hallway, the lingering glow of candlelight fading from the room. The storm outside begins to ease, but inside, something deeper has shifted, a sense that the wall between them, though still standing, has finally developed its first small crack. The storm passes, leaving behind skies so clear they seem freshly washed. The days that follow feel subtly different, lighter, as if the building itself remembers the night of candles and quiet conversation. Their hallway greetings now come with the ease of two people who have shared something genuine. It isn't dramatic, but it's enough to make every small interaction feel newly significant. One Saturday morning, sunlight pours gently into the courtyard garden, warming the benches still damp from earlier dew. The narrator spots her there again, seated with a cup of tea cradled in both hands, her cardigan loosely wrapped around her shoulders. This time she looks at peace, not lost in thought, just quietly present. He joins her without the uncertainty he once felt, carrying 2 paper cups of coffee. "I brought a truce offering," he says with a half-smile, holding one cup out to her. She accepts it, the corner of her mouth lifting slightly. "I never declared war," she teases softly. Her voice carries a warmth that feels like the first sunlight after a long rain. They sit side by side, sipping their drinks while the garden hums with early morning life. The rustle of leaves, the distant hum of a passing car, a sparrow landing on the low fence as if curious about their quiet companionship. Their conversation drifts naturally, touching on light things at first, her latest work project, his sketches of the garden fence, a neighbor's dog that keeps stealing socks from the laundry line. But beneath the casual words is a steady calm, a shared comfort that has replaced the uncertainty of their first meetings. After a pause, she says softly, "You're easier to be around than I expected. I don't usually let people in this far." He glances at her, sensing the weight of what she's admitting. "I didn't expect you to," he replies. "I just wanted to know you were okay. That's all I ever wanted." Her fingers trace the rim of her cup as though debating what to say next. "I was worried," she begins, her tone quieter now. "Not about you. About me. I thought if I let you get close, it would stir up things I'd put to rest a long time ago." She looks down at the tea swirling gently in her cup. I didn't want that to be unfair to you. He takes a moment before answering, his voice low but certain. Maybe that's what makes it fair, that we're both aware of what's at stake. For a while they let the words hang between them, neither needing to fill the silence. A soft breeze carries the faint scent of jasmine from the corner of the garden. When she finally looks up at him again, her expression is no longer guarded. She offers a small, almost shy smile. I'm glad the walls here are thin. Otherwise, I might have never knocked on your door that night. He chuckles quietly at that, the memory of their first meeting now feeling distant and tender. Best midnight knock I've ever had, he says. They don't reach for each other, don't rush to define anything. Instead, as they sit there, her shoulder shifts just slightly until it brushes his arm. The contact is light but unhurried, a quiet acknowledgement of the bond that has been carefully built between them. The sun climbs higher, and the garden fills with gentle morning light. For the first time, it feels as though there's no longer a wall between them, only a shared space where silence feels like something they both belong to. When they finally stand to leave, it's with an unspoken understanding. Whatever happens next will be shaped by patience, not haste. As they walk back toward their doors side by side, the distance that once defined them seems smaller, replaced by a warmth that lingers long after they've gone their separate ways. That night, he sketches her one last time, not as the neighbor who knocked on his door, not as the woman who seemed out of reach, but as she was that morning in the garden, peaceful, with sunlight caught in her hair and a quiet smile that promised a gentler tomorrow. Dizzy, if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more slow burn age gap romances. Share your favorite moment in the comments below. I'd love to hear which scene stayed with you the most. Your support helps bring more heartfelt stories to life. Dizzy.